East Timor /ʻiːst /Timor or Timor-Leste /Timor Florenti / officially the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, is a country in Southeast Asia. It comprises the eastern half of the island of Timor, the nearby islands of Atauro and Jaco, and Oecusse, an exclave on the northwestern side of the island, within Indonesian West Timor. The country's size is about 15,410 km². East Timor was colonized by Portugal in the 16th century, and was known as Portuguese Timor until Portugal's decolonization of the country. In late 1975, East Timor declared its independence, but later that year was invaded and occupied by Indonesia and was declared Indonesia's 27th province the following year. In 1999, following the United Nations-sponsored Act of Self-Determination, Indonesia relinquished control of the territory, and East Timor became the first new sovereign state of the 21st century on May 20, 2002. After independence, East Timor became a member of the United Nations and the Community of Portuguese-language countries. It is one of only two predominantly Roman Catholic countries in Asia, the other being the Philippines. East Timor has a lower middle-income economy. About 37.4% of the country's population lives below the international poverty linear euro, which means living on less than $1.25 per day or euro, and about 50% of the population is illiterate. It continues to suffer the after-effects of a decades-long struggle for independence against Indonesian occupation, which severely damaged the country's infrastructure and killed at least 100,000 people. The country is placed 134th on the Human Development Index. Nonetheless, East Timor is expected to have the sixth-largest percentage growth in GDP in the world for 2013. Etymology: Timor derives from timur, the word for east in Indonesian and Malay, which became Timor in Portuguese and entered English as Portuguese Timor. Leste is the Portuguese word for east, resulting in Timor-Leste. In Tetum the name is ʻtiːmɔr de Laurosea, from Laurosea the word for east in that language. The official names under the constitution are República Democrática de Timor-Leste in Portuguese and República Democrática Timor-Leste in Tetum. The International Organization for Standardization official short form in English and all other languages is Timor-Leste, which has been adopted by the United Nations, the European Union, and the national standards organizations of France, the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, and Sweden. All diplomatic missions to the country by protocol and the CIA World Factbook, History. It is believed that descendants from at least 3 waves of migration still live in East Timor. The first were related to the principal Australoid indigenous groups of New Guinea and Australia, and arrived before 40,000 years ago. Around 3000 BC, Austronesians migrated to Timor, and are thought to be associated with the development of agriculture on the island. Thirdly, Proto-Malays arrived from South China and North Indochina. Before colonialism, Timor was included in Chinese and Indian trading networks, being in the 14th century an exporter of aromatic sandalwood, slaves, honey, and wax. It was the relative abundance of sandalwood in Timor that attracted European explorers to the island in the early 16th century. During that time, European explorers reported that the island had a number of small chiefdoms or princedoms. Portuguese colonial rule. The Portuguese established outposts in Timor and Maluku. Effective European occupation of a small part of the territory began in 1769, when the city of Dili was founded and the colony of Portuguese Timor declared. A definitive border between the Dutch colonized western half of the island and the Portuguese colonized eastern half of the island was established by the Permanent Court of Arbitration of 1914, and it remains the international boundary between the successor states East Timor and Indonesia. For the Portuguese, East Timor remained little more than a neglected trading post until the late 19th century, with minimal investment in infrastructure, health, and education. Sandalwood remained the main export crop, with coffee exports becoming significant in the mid-19th century. As was often the case, Portuguese rule was generally neglectful but exploitative where it existed. At the beginning of the 20th century, a faltering home economy prompted the Portuguese to extract greater wealth from its colonies, which was met with East Timorese resistance. During World War II, the Japanese occupied Dili, and the mountainous interior became the scene of a guerrilla campaign, known as the Battle of Timor. Waged by Allied forces and East Timorese volunteers against the Japanese, the struggle resulted in the deaths of between 40,000 and 70,000 East Timorese. Following the end of the war, Portuguese control was reinstated. The decolonization process instigated by the 1974 Portuguese Revolution saw Portugal effectively abandon the colony of East Timor. A civil war between supporters of East Timorese political parties, the Revolutionary Front for an Independent East Timor and the Timorese Democratic Union, broke out in 1975 as the UDT attempted a coup that Fretilin resisted with the help of local Portuguese military. Independence was unilaterally declared by Fretilin on November 28, 1975. Indonesian occupation. The Indonesian government was fearful of an independent communist state within the Indonesian archipelago, and at the height of the Cold War, Western governments were supportive of Indonesia's position. The Indonesian military launched a full-scale invasion of East Timor in December 1975. Indonesia declared East Timor its 27th province on July 17, 1976. The Union Security Council opposed the invasion and the territory's nominal status in the UN remained as non-self-governing territory under Portuguese administration. Indonesia's occupation of East Timor was marked by violence and brutality. A detailed statistical report prepared for the Commission for Reception, Truth and Reconciliation in East Timor cited a minimum bound of 102,800 conflict-related deaths in the period 1974–1999, namely, approximately 18,600 killings and 84,200 excess deaths from hunger and illness. The East Timorese guerrilla force, Falintil, fought a campaign against the Indonesian forces from 1975 to 1999. Independence. The 1991 Dili massacre was a turning point for the independence cause internationally, and an East Timor solidarity movement grew in Portugal, Australia, and the United States. Following the resignation of Indonesian President Suharto, a UN-sponsored agreement between Indonesia and Portugal allowed for a UN-supervised popular referendum in August 1999. The resulting clear vote for independence was met with a punitive campaign of violence by East Timorese pro-integration militia with the support of elements of the Indonesian military. With Indonesian permission, an Australian-led international peacekeeping force was deployed until order was restored. The administration of East Timor was taken over by the UN through the United Nations Transitional Administration in East Timor in October 1999. The interfleet deployment ended in February 2000 with the transfer of military command to the UN. By May 2002, over 205,000 refugees had returned, and East Timorese independence was formalized on May 20, 2002 with Xanana Gusma Poundo sworn in as the country's first president. East Timor became a member of the UN on September 27, 2002. The following year, Gusma Poundo declined another presidential term, and in the build-up to the April 2007 presidential elections there were renewed outbreaks of violence. José Copyright Ramos Horta was elected president in the May 2007 election. Ramos Horta was critically injured in an attempted assassination in February 2008. Prime Minister Gusma Poundo also faced gunfire separately but escaped unharmed. Australian reinforcements were immediately sent to help keep order. In 2006, the United Nations sent in security forces to restore order when unrest and factional fighting forced 15% of the population to flee their homes. In March 2011, the UN handed off operational control of the police force to the East Timor authorities. The United Nations ended its peacekeeping mission on December 31, 2012. Government. The head of state of East Timor is the President of East Timor, who is elected by popular vote for a 5-year term. Although his executive powers are somewhat limited, the President does have veto power over government legislation. Following elections, the President appoints the leader of the majority party or majority coalition as the Prime Minister of East Timor. As head of government, the Prime Minister presides over the cabinet. The unicameral East Timorese Parliament is the national parliament or Parlamento Nacional, whose members are elected by popular vote to a 5-year term. The number of seats can vary from a minimum of 52 to a maximum of 65. The East Timorese constitution was modelled on that of Portugal. The country is still in the process of building its administration and governmental institutions. Government departments include the Policía Nacional de Timor-Leste, East Timor Ministry for State and Internal Administration, Civil Aviation Division of Timor-Leste, and Immigration Department of Timor-Leste. Administrative divisions. East Timor is divided into 13 administrative districts, which, in turn, are subdivided into 65 subdistricts, 442 sucas, and 2,225 alduars. Foreign relations and military. East Timor sought membership in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in 2007, and a formal application was submitted in March 2011. Indonesia supports East Timor's bid to join ASEAN. The Timor-Leste Defense Force is the military body responsible for the defense of East Timor. The FFDTL was established in February 2001 and comprised 2 small infantry battalions, a small naval component, and several supporting units. The FFDTL's primary role is to protect East Timor from external threats. It also has an internal security role, which overlaps with that of the National Police of East Timor. This overlap has led to tensions between the services, which have been exacerbated by poor morale and lack of discipline within the FFDTL. The FFDTL's problems came to a head in 2006 when almost half the force was dismissed following protests over discrimination and poor conditions. The dismissal contributed to a general collapse of both the FFDTL and PNTL in May and forced the government to request foreign peacekeepers to restore security. The FFDTL is being rebuilt with foreign assistance and has drawn up a long-term force development plan. Geography. Located in Southeast Asia, the island of Timor is part of the maritime Southeast Asia, and is the largest and easternmost of the Lesser Sunda Islands. To the north of the island are the Ombai Strait, ʻiːst Strait, and the Greater Banda Sea. The Timor Sea separates the island from Australia to the south, and the Indonesian province of East Nusa Tenggara lies to East Timor's west. Much of the country is mountainous, and its highest is Tatamalo at 2,963 meters. The climate is tropical and generally hot and humid. It is characterized by distinct rainy and dry seasons. The capital, largest city, and main port is Dili, and the second largest city is the eastern town of Baukor. East Timor lies between latitudes 80° and 10°S, and longitudes 124° and 128°E. The easternmost area of East Timor consists of the Pachau Range and the Lake Irilalaro area, which contains the country's first conservation area, the Ninokonis Santana National Park. It contains the last remaining tropical dry forested area within the country. It hosts a number of unique plant and animal species and is sparsely populated. The northern coast is characterized by a number of coral reef systems that have been determined to be at risk. Economy. East Timor has a market economy that used to depend upon exports of a few commodities such as coffee, marble, oil, and sandalwood. East Timor's economy grew by about 10% in 2011 and at a similar rate in 2012. Timor now has revenue from offshore oil and gas reserves, but little of it has gone to develop villages, which still rely on subsistence farming. Nearly half the population lives in extreme poverty. The Timor-Leste Petroleum Fund was established in 2005, and by 2011 it had reached a worth of $8.7 billion. East Timor is labeled by the International Monetary Fund as the most oil-dependent economy in the world. The Petroleum Fund pays for nearly all of the government's annual budget, which has increased from $70 million in 2004 to $1.3 billion in 2011, with a $1.8 billion proposal for 2012. The economy is dependent on government spending and, to a lesser extent, assistance from international donors. Private sector development has lagged due to human capital shortages, infrastructure weakness, an incomplete legal system, and an inefficient regulatory environment. After petroleum, the second largest export is coffee, which generates about $10 million a year. Starbucks is a major purchaser of East Timorese coffee. According to data gathered in the 2010 census, 87.7% of urban and 18.9% of rural households have electricity, for an overall average of 36.7%. The agriculture sector employs 80% of the active population. In 2009, about 67,000 households grew coffee in East Timor, with a large proportion being poor. Currently, the gross margins are about $120 per hectare, with returns per labor day of about $3.70. There are 11,000 households growing mung beans as of 2009, most of them subsistence farmers. The country was ranked 169th overall and last in the East Asia and Pacific region by the Doing Business 2013 report by the World Bank. The country fared particularly poorly in the registering property, enforcing contracts and resolving insolvency categories, ranking last worldwide in all three. In regards to telecommunications infrastructure, Timor-Leste is the second to last ranked Asian country in the World Economic Forum's Network Readiness Index, with only Myanmar falling behind it in Southeast Asia. NRI is an indicator for determining the development level of a country. Unregistered trademark S information and communication technologies. Timor-Leste ranked number 141 overall in the 2014 NRI ranking, down from 134 in 2013. The Portuguese colonial administration granted concessions to Oceanic Exploration Corporation to develop petroleum and natural gas deposits in the waters southeast of Timor. However, this was curtailed by the Indonesian invasion in 1976. The resources were divided between Indonesia and Australia with the Timor Gap Treaty in 1989. East Timor inherited no permanent maritime boundaries when it attained independence. A provisional agreement defined a joint petroleum development area and awarded 90% of revenues from existing projects in that area to East Timor and 10% to Australia. An agreement in 2005 between the governments of East Timor and Australia mandated that both countries put aside their dispute over maritime boundaries and that East Timor would receive 50% of the revenues from the resource exploitation in the area from the Greater Sunrise development. In 2013, East Timor launched a case at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague to pull out of a gas treaty that it had signed with Australia, accusing the Australian Secret Intelligence Service of bugging the East Timorese cabinet room in Dili in 2004. There are no patent laws in East Timor. Demographics. The population of East Timor is about 1,143,667. The population is especially concentrated in the area around Dili. The word Mober, formerly used by the Portuguese to refer to native East Timorese and often employed as synonymous with the illiterate and uneducated, was adopted by Fretlin as a term of pride. They consist of a number of distinct ethnic groups, most of whom are of mixed Malayo-Polynesian and Melanesian Papuan descent. The largest Malayo-Polynesian ethnic groups are the ʻtiːmɔr, primarily in the north coast and around Dili. The Mambai, in the central mountains. The Tukudid, in the area around Marlborough and Liquiya Pickavolt. The Galolai, between the tribes of Mambaye and Makasi. The Kimak in north-central Timor Island. And the Bayakano, in the area around Pantai Makassar. The main tribes of predominantly Papuan origin include the Banak, in the central interior of Timor Island. The Fatiluku, at the eastern tip of the island near Los Palos. And the Makasi, toward the eastern end of the island. As a result of interracial marriage which was common during the Portuguese era, there is a population of people of mixed East Timorese and Portuguese origin, known in Portuguese as Mestia Section Os. There is a small Chinese minority, most of whom are Hakka. Many Chinese left in the mid-1970s. Languages. East Timor's two official languages are Portuguese and ʻtiːmɔr. ʻtiːmɔr belongs to the Austronesian family of languages spoken throughout Southeast Asia. The 2010 census found that the most commonly spoken mother tongues were ʻtiːmɔr Praza, Mambai, Makasai, ʻtiːmɔr Terik, Bayakanu, Kimak, Banak, Tokudid, and Fatiluku. Other indigenous languages largely accounted for the remaining 10.9%, while Portuguese was spoken natively by just under 600 people. Under Indonesian rule, the use of Portuguese was banned and only Indonesian was allowed to be used in government offices, schools and public business. During the Indonesian occupation, Titom and Portuguese were important unifying elements for the East Timorese people in opposing Javanese culture. Portuguese was adopted as one of the two official languages upon independence in 2002 for this reason and as a link to Lusophone nations in other parts of the world. It is now being taught and promoted with the help of Brazil, Portugal, and the Latin Union. Indonesian and English are defined as working languages under the Constitution in the final and transitional provisions, without setting a final date. Aside from Titom, Ethnologue lists the following indigenous languages: Adabe, Bayakano, Bunak, Fatiluku, Galolai, Habun, Idata copyright, Kairui Madiki, Kimak, Lakelay, Makasi, Makva, Mumbai, Note, Tukudid, and Wayame. It is estimated that English is understood by 31.4% of the population. 23.5% speak, read, and write Portuguese as of 2012. Which is up significantly from less than 5% in the 2006 UN Development Report. East Timor is a member of the Community of Portuguese-language countries and of the Latin Union. According to the Atlas of the World's Languages in Danger, there are 6 endangered languages in East Timor: Adabe, Habu, Kairui Madiki, Makua, Noti, and Wayame. Education. East Timor's adult literacy rate in 2010 was 58.3%, up from just 37.6% in 2001. Illiteracy is higher among women. Illiteracy was at 95% at the end of Portuguese rule. In 2006, 10% to 30% of primary school-aged children did not attend school. The National University of East Timor is the country's main university. There are also 4 colleges. Since independence, both Indonesian and Titom have lost ground as mediums of instruction, while Portuguese has increased. In 2001 only 8.4% of primary school and 6.8% of secondary school students attended a Portuguese medium school. By 2005 this had increased to 81.6% for primary and 46.3% for secondary schools. Indonesian formerly played a considerable role in education, being used by 73.7% of all secondary school students as a medium of instruction, but by 2005 it was used by most schools only in Bogor, Manito, as well as the capital district. Health. Life expectancy at birth was at 60.7 in 2007. The fertility rate is at 6 births per woman. Healthy life expectancy at birth was at 55 years in 2007. Government expenditure on health was at $150 per person in 2006. Many people in East Timor lack safe drinking water. There were 2 hospitals and 14 village healthcare facilities in 1974. By 1994, there were 11 hospitals and 330 healthcare centers. The 2010 maternal mortality rate per 100,000 births for East Timor is 370. This is compared with 928.6 in 2008 and 1016.3 in 1990. The under 5 mortality rate per 1,000 births is 60 and the neonatal mortality rate per 1,000 live births is 27. The number of midwives per 1,000 live births is 8 and the lifetime risk of death for pregnant women is 1 in 44. The country has one of the highest smoking rates in the world, with 33% of the population, including 61% of men, smoking daily. By 2015, due to a Cubana-Euro-East Timorese training program initiated in 2003, East Timor will have more doctors per capita than any other country in Southeast Asia. According to the Global Hunger Index of 2013, East Timor has an GHI indicator value of 29.6, indicating that the nation has an alarming hunger situation, earning the nation the distinction of being the hungriest country in the entire continent of Asia and the 4th hungriest nation in the world. In 2007, a bad harvest led to deaths in several parts of East Timor. By November, 11 sub-districts still needed food supplied by international aid. Religion. According to the 2010 census, 96.9% of the population profess Catholicism. 2.2% Protestantism or Evangelicalism. 0.3% are Muslim. And 0.5% practice some other or no religion. The number of churches has grown from 100 in 1974 to over 800 in 1994, with church membership having grown considerably under Indonesian rule, as Pancasila, Indonesia's state ideology, requires all citizens to believe in one God and does not recognize traditional beliefs. In rural areas, Catholicism is practiced along with local traditions. While the Constitution of East Timor enshrines the principles of freedom of religion and separation of church and state in Section 45(1), it also acknowledges the participation of the Catholic Church in the process of national liberation. Upon independence, the country joined the Philippines to become the only two predominantly Roman Catholic states in Asia, although nearby parts of eastern Indonesia such as West Timor and Flores also have Catholic majorities. The Roman Catholic Church divides East Timor into three dioceses: the Diocese of Dali, the Diocese of Balcor, and the Diocese of Maliana. Culture. The culture of East Timor reflects numerous influences, including Portuguese, Roman Catholic and Indonesian, on Timor's indigenous Austronesian and Melanesian cultures. East Timorese culture is heavily influenced by Austronesian legends. For example, East Timorese creation myth has it that an aging crocodile transformed into the island of Timor as part of a debt repayment to a young boy who had helped the crocodile when it was sick. As a result, the island is shaped like a crocodile and the boy's descendants are the native East Timorese who inhabit it. The phrase "leaving the crocodile" refers to the pained exile of East Timorese from their island. Arts. There is also a strong tradition of poetry in the country. Prime Minister Xanana Gusma Poundo, for example, is a distinguished poet. Architecturally, Portuguese-style buildings can be found, along with the traditional totem houses of the eastern region. These are known as Uma Lulikantitam and Litianu in Fatiluku. Craftsmanship and the weaving of traditional scarves is also widespread. An extensive collection of Timorese audiovisual material is held at the National Film and Sound Archive of Australia. These holdings have been identified in a document titled the NFSA Timor-Leste Collection Profile, which features catalogue entries and essays for a total of 795 NFSA-held moving image, recorded sound and documentation works that have captured the history and culture of East Timor since the early 20th century. The NFSA is working with the East Timor government to ensure that all of this material can be used and accessed by the people of that country. In 2013, the first East Timorese feature film, Beatrice's War, was released. Cuisine. The cuisine of East Timor consists of regional popular foods such as pork, fish, basil, tamarind, legumes, corn, rice, root vegetables, and tropical fruit. East Timorese cuisine has influences from Southeast Asian foods and from Portuguese dishes from its colonization by Portugal. Flavors and ingredients from other former Portuguese colonies can be found due to the century-old Portuguese presence on the island. Sports. Sports organizations joined by East Timor include the International Olympic Committee, the International Association of Athletics Federations, the International Badminton Federation, joined the Union Cycliste Internationale, the International Weightlifting Federation, the International Table Tennis Federation, and East Timor's national football team joined FIFA. East Timorese athletes competed in the 2003 Southeast Asian Games held 2003. In the 2003 ASEAN Paralympics Games, East Timor won a bronze medal. In the Athens 2004 Olympic Games, East Timorese athletes participated in athletics, weightlifting and boxing. East Timor won 3 medals in harness at the 2005 Southeast Asian Games. East Timor competed in the first Lusophony Games and, in October 2008, the country earned its first international points in a FIFA soccer match with a 2-2 draw against Cambodia. East Timor competed at the 2014 Winter Olympics. See also. References. Bibliography. External links. Government, Timor-Leste official government website, Chief of State and Cabinet Members, General Information, Timor-Leste entry at the World Factbook, East Timor from UCB Libraries GovPubs, Timor-Leste at DMOZ, East Timor at Encyclopaedia Britannica, East Timor profile BBC News, Wikimedia Atlas of East Timor, key development forecasts for Timor-Leste from International Futures.